Marvelous. So welcome for anyone who's on this call, who's maybe joining for the first time. My name's Luke. I'm the W Club manager here at the Whisky Shop. New departure today, which is our first foray into rum. So thanks to everyone who's joining live or watching the recording and going on this journey. At the end, I'll be giving the usual 15% discount on all these delicious rums. So yeah, I suppose that's the only other thing is to get your tasting notes and comments and questions in the chat. But I think looking at the names, I think most of you already are well able to do that. So that's marvelous. Well, that's enough for me. Georgia, do you want to first of all, I suppose, explain a bit about yourself, and then the running order we're going to go in tonight, and then we'll dive into the first rum.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds perfect. So, again, hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you, firstly, for giving rum a chance to sort of penetrate your whiskey club. It's really exciting to be with you on that sort of first step into a new category. Um, Myself, I've been the Brugal brand ambassador for the UK market since the beginning of this year, more or less. Before that, I was working in hospitality, mostly in London myself as well. So I've sort of watched the rum world, particularly the premium rum world, sort of start to become something of a bit more interest and again start to become something that people in sort of whiskey aficionado circles are more intrigued by. And so it's really exciting to be on the precipice of that and watching rum, Brugal predominantly, of course, but rum in general as a category start to sort of blossom, if you like, into new directions and new dimensions.
Oh, marvelous. And we're delighted to be part of that. So in terms of the running order tonight, we're going to start with the 1880.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got
1888,
four
sorry.
delicious.
Max.
Don't you worry. We've got four delicious SKUs to get through today. I should all have your little bottles in front of you, and the very first dram that we'll get started with today will be the Brugal 1888, as Luke said. So feel free. I'm gonna sort of start us off, guys, by a little bit of an overview of Brugal as a brand. You know, we've been around for quite some time, but I understand that not everyone will be familiar with us. So I thought I'd start off by giving a little bit of an overview of Brugal, of our sort of heritage story as a brand, and then we'll move into the ins and outs of each of the fantastic rums that you've got there to try. But don't wait for me to get to the 1888 before you dive in. I've already got mine here, so please pour a little bit out
Got
and we'll
mine
get
here. And
cracking.
just I know some of our regulars like to pre-pour all of them in front of them. So are we going to go on to the Maestro next? And then the
So the
PP1,
journey will
PP2?
be 1888, and then you should have Collection Visionaria 1 and also Collection Visionaria 2 and Maestro Reserva, which will be the finishing dram. So 1888, followed by Collection Visionaria 1, then Collection Visionaria 2, and then Maestro Reserva.
Fantastic. I'm just sticking that in the chat there, folks, for anyone who keep account. Although it should be an easy one to remember, but just in case.
Just in case, and I've actually prepared a few little slides just to make sure that we stay on track and give a bit of an overview anyway. So at least we've got that there as a prompt just in case.
Marvelous.
But yes, let's begin, like I say, with a little bit of the 1888. And I will just share my screen with you really briefly and sort of take you through the journey from 1888, which is the year that we started to produce from, right up until now.
Fantastic.
And let's see.
Well, while you bring
Okay.
that up, Dom has said in the chat, great nose on this oak spice, toffee, and fruits. So great taste notes already coming. Tony says, wow, caramelized plantain and overripe bananas. Marvelous.
Yes, absolutely. Those are some of the most dominant notes in the nose on this, I can tell you for sure. I think that for me, what prevails across the entirety of the Brugal portfolio, as we'll see, is that warm sort of raisin and a little bit of that rich honey on the nose there. Everything we're going to try today is quite different, but those are the two notes that seem to always be there and always carry through and keep that consistency for Brugal products. So before Brugal, of course, we had our incredible founder, Don Andrés Brugal Montaner. And that is a Spanish name for a man of Spanish heritage. So he actually found himself in the Dominican Republic, having left his hometown in Catalonia in Spain in around about 1870, and left there as the first son of winemakers. And rather than going into the wine family business, he wanted to learn about the new and interesting product coming from the other side of the world. So he sets off and actually finds himself over in the Dominican Republic via a quick stint in Cuba. So it's a little sort of infographic, if you like, of his voyage over from Catalonia in Spain to the Dominican Republic via Cuba. And he landed most specifically in a place called Puerto Plata, which is on the north side of the Dominican Republic. And that was the place that he was able to actualize his dreams of becoming an expert rum maker. And now, somehow, we are 5 generations into that story. Of course, this isn't all of those 5 generations. Unfortunately, they're not all here to sort of see where we are right now. But in this image, you've actually got generations 4 and 5. And it's really a beautiful testament to the journey that the brand has been on, and all of the different people in the Brugal family that have had a connection to and been a part of this journey, if you like. Now, where we're at is we've got the incredible Cecile Villanueva Quintana at the helm. She's our Maestra Ronera, or Master Rum Blender, if you like. And she is the great great granddaughter of our founder, Andres Brugal. And everything that we're going to taste today is really a testament to her, yes, but also the 5 generations of knowledge that she's able to ascertain, being the great great granddaughter of Don Andres. So this is a beautiful sort of brief version of what those 5 generations look like. And what a lot of people might not know about Brugal is just how family oriented it actually is as a brand, and how proudly traditional whilst also daringly innovative we sort of are as a brand. So every generation has left a lasting imprint on what the brand has become today. And with everything that we do, we try to look back and honor that. So Brugal 1888 is actually a perfect example of just how we do that. Our first generation, of course, begins with Don Andres. And a great fact about him, and one of the things that makes us understand the trajectory the brand would go on, is he was the first person in the Dominican Republic to age rum at all. That was way back in 1904.
That seems
What
seems
was
relatively recent in the grand scheme of things. Was there in other parts of the kind of Caribbean, Central American, North or South American world that produced rum at the time? Were they aging, or was he how predominant was it in the rum industry at that point?
Well, unfortunately, we are not able to claim having been the first in the Caribbean to age rum. That was definitely something that was happening a little while before, certainly in English style rum producing countries. So looking over at maybe Barbados and Jamaica, we would have seen that aging starting a little bit earlier in places like that. And ironically, actually, the Dominican Republic was the first place in the sort of new world of the Caribbean that Christopher Columbus ever planted sugarcane. So it was the first island to harvest sugarcane, but it wasn't necessarily the first to produce rum, nor was it the first to actually age rum. That actually came a little bit later for us.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know I wouldn't feel certain of how exactly that trajectory has worked, but the sort of the way in which rum grew in the Americas, in the Caribbean, it was really led by the colonies that were in control at the time. So you've typically got your English style rums sort of started to rise at a different time through the Spanish and French, for example. On that note, actually, folks, it's probably a good opportunity for me to mention what I mean when I say those things. So the way in which we break down rum is there's a lot of different ways to do it, actually, and its greatest gift and also its greatest curse as a category, how diverse rum is. Unlike other categories, the only global legislation is that it must be made from fermenting and distilling sugarcane juice or another sugarcane derivative. The rest is kind of up to you. But there are geographical specifications, and then there are also national requirements as well. So the Dominican Republic have our own specific requirements for a Dominican rum, for instance. But before being a Dominican rum, we are a Spanish style rum. And the three countries that were actually making rum in the Americas, if you like, back at the inception of rum was, of course, the English, the French, and the Spanish. And they all developed their own different style of producing it. My favorite story is that the French, they refer to molasses as le déchet. Anyone that speaks French, please forgive my terrible accent on that. But effectively what that means is the rubbish or the throwaway. They didn't believe there was a value for molasses. So French style rums, French speaking countries like Guadeloupe, Martinique, the rums coming from there will traditionally be made with sugarcane juice.
Now, is that like
Whereas
rum agricole, is it? Or is that different again?
exactly. We would call it rum agricole. And it's in a lot of ways it's kind of its own style of rum, but again, because that global specification is so vague, there's so much room for flexibility and to play around. And while you have these significant distinctions, they still can sit under that same umbrella.
And there was a big tradition of, or I actually I don't know. I'm asking this as a question. I was starting. The reason I put myself up there is because I was stating it as if it was fact. But I my understanding was that there's much more tradition in French rum for it actually being exported back to Europe for distillation there versus maybe islands like Barbados, Jamaica, where most of the distilling was going on in the Caribbean. But I don't know if that's apocryphal what I've just said.
No, I think you're absolutely right, to be honest with you. I mean, over in Europe, distillation techniques would have been far more advanced than sort of what was happening over in the Caribbean. Things would have had to be purpose built. Whereas if they had the facilities to be able to ship things back over to Europe and then use what they already had over there, so using, cognac stills, let's say, for instance, over in France, there's a lot more, it feels a lot easier potentially than having to sort of start from scratch. So there's a lot of sort of, I think in more categories than rum, certainly, a lot of the ways in which spirits mold into having certain rules is actually because of convenience, right? These countries or even regions, they choose to work with what they've got. They choose to work with the casks that they've got, the climate that they've got, the raw ingredients that they have available to them. And that's actually sort of what ends up setting the precedent for the stylistic choices,
Yeah.
as opposed to particularly, back in the 18th, 19th century, it wasn't necessarily a stylistic choice as much as one of necessity and or convenience, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, that makes. I mean, early whiskey and beer obviously is it's grain preservation. It's your surplus. What are you going to do with it? Like if you distill it, it lasts a lot longer than letting it rot in a silo or something. I've distracted you from your rum categories though. I would like to go back. I want to draw attention to the a couple of great tasting notes and comments in there. So Dom says ripe bananas, raisins with elements of pencil shavings in the palate with honey sweetness and
Ooh.
cloves in the finish, very drinkable. Tony says, "Don't at me, but I'm finishing my dessert treat of some nice vanilla ice cream with a digestive on the side, and I'm struggling not to drizzle this deliciousness over the top." Tony, I know you made that comment a couple minutes ago, but if you haven't already, I would recommend doing that. The
Uh-huh. Don't hold back. That sounds
exactly.
perfect.
No, definitely. And Dom says the cask influence really comes through the American oak spiciness and dried fruit and chocolate, reflecting the Oloroso casks. Brilliant. So, Georgia, I rudely interrupted
No,
your
not at
categories
all.
of
Not at
rum by
all.
my little rum agricole digression. So, if the French are making that style rum, what are the other categories?
Of course, I'll skim over them because there's so much to get to in this glass right here, and I'm sure everyone's really excited to sort of get to that. And those tasting notes are so incredible, and I would love to give them a bit more attention. So I'll skim really quickly to that to get to that point. But the two different styles there would be the English style then and the Spanish style, which is what we are as Brugal. And English and Spanish styles traditionally will use molasses. So that's the core difference with French is the sugarcane juice is used, and then English and Spanish style traditionally will use molasses. The difference between English and Spanish style predominantly will be the style of distillation. So the English style rums will use a copper pot, and the Spanish style will use double column distillation. What that means in terms of Brugal certainly is that we come off the still at around 95% ABV. And our fermentation is quite short as well. As a product, it's around 36 hours. So what comes off of that still is what we like to consider almost a blank canvas. Yes, it's got some incredible, like delicate fruitiness, even a little bit of grassiness will still come through there. But Spanish style rums are traditionally coming off that still as a blank canvas onto which you can paint different strokes of flavor with the casks that you use. So around 85% of the flavor of Brugal, for instance, we attribute to the expert cask decisions that our maestros make and how those then influence that blank canvas, if you like.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just
So
swallowing my 1888.
it's yeah, it's an interesting one to be honest with you. Like looking back at those three styles, because while they're really great ways for us to look into the rum space, they are by no means legislative. So a lot of those countries will have their own requirements as well. And as I said, the Dominican rums are no exception. And Dominican rums will use at least 51% locally grown sugarcane juice or molasses for their production. And they have to be aged for at least 1 year in any oak cask of choice, for example. So those are two requirements of Dominican rum that will differ from Venezuelan, for example, which is also a Spanish style typically. So that's just sort of an overview on those three different styles. We are religiously Spanish style because that is the sort of traditional style, the traditional backbone of what we do. And always, of course, looking back at our founders' heritage. So moving forward from there, then, folks, we are in our second generation, as you see just here. And our second generation is where we're able to internationalize Brugal. And in internationalizing the brand, we introduced the signature netting, which you can see it just over there in the 1888 bottle. And you'll see it a little bit closer when I move on to the next slide in just a second. That was actually introduced initially as fisherman's netting, just to keep our bottles safe in transit. It was something that the second generation noticed was happening to precious cargo. They brought it back, implemented it as a means of keeping our cargo safe. And now, 4 generations later, it's still something that's emblematic of our heritage story and something that we hold really close to our heart.
Marvelous.
Moving to the third generation is our rum mastery, and that's where you first see the inception of our double aging process. We also sold all of our sugarcane fields at that point as a brand. We'd actually been producing our own up until then, by which point we decided to sell those off, still source 100% locally, but as an actual brand, as a distillery, we wanted to focus on the production side of things and leave the agriculture to the professionals.
Brilliant. We just have a question in there from Tony C. It says, apologies, just to but to clarify, sugarcane juice was historically viewed as higher quality base versus molasses as a quote unquote waste product, question mark. Um, what is that the case or?
Yeah, so for the French, if you like, so places like I say, such as Martinique, Guadeloupe, those countries that were starting to produce rum around a similar time, their assumption was that molasses was trash. It was garbage. There was sort of nothing to be gleaned from it. So sugarcane juice was kind of the only sugarcane derivative that they were interested in using for producing anything, but
Hmm.
most specifically producing spirits. That was, of course, not an opinion that was shared by the English and Spanish style, English and Spanish colonies. At the time, they decided that they would get everything that they could out of every part of that sugarcane plant because actually in molasses you've still got around 50 to 58% fermentable sugars left over in that like thick gloopy goodness. There's still so much to get from that. It won't have the same bright earthiness and grassiness that you would experience from sugarcane juice, but you've got a lot more of that sort of rich, dark, chocolatey sweetness, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, no, big time. Yeah, yeah.
So
Marvelous.
that's
Unless that doesn't make sense to Tony C. If so, then say in the chat. But yeah, and he says thanks. That's very interesting. So marvelous. Thanks for that.
no worries. It's worth mentioning actually while we're talking about molasses that Brugal will always use 100% locally grown, locally produced sugarcane molasses that's always a minimum of 55% fermentable sugars. And that's a kind of non-negotiable for the distillery, just because again our fermentation process is so short that if we compromise on the amount of fermentable sugars there, we're just not going to have a consistent product. And so it's really great. It's really quite convenient that we source locally because if ever it shows up and it's not at that 55%, of course, that shipment has to get sent back. And at the moment, on site at the Brugal distillery, there is around 3 million gallons. Annoyingly, I only know it in gallons because that's the system that they use over there. But 3 million gallons of molasses on site at any given time. So you can imagine getting in even 500,000 gallons of that and it not being to spec and having to send it all the way across the ocean again.
Mm.
So really quite beneficial for us to source locally.
No, definitely. I know. I can imagine. And I know that in different regions, sometimes they pool molasses. I'm not sure about Dominican Republic and other places they don't. So yeah, no, it's a rabbit hole we could spend a while on. But maybe we'll come on to the Coleccion Visionary or Visionaria. Sorry, how do you pronounce that?
I tell you what, we'll finish off on the 1888 sort of legacy story, if you like, and then, as
Good
you
idea.
suggest, we should move straight on to Collection Visionaria because I want to make sure that we've got ample amounts of time to enjoy every dram. So, 1888, I'm sure you guys have already had an opportunity to sit with it and to find your own tasting notes there, find out what really resonates with you, and everything that's been coming up in the chat so far has been spot on. And these are, as you can see, really top line sort of tasting notes that are, the more easily accessible ones. But there are a lot more nuances to get out of here. And a lot of that, I think, is thanks to the incredible double aging process that goes into producing Brugal products, including and beginning with 1888. So as we've noticed already, we've got Oloroso sherry influence in there, but the 1888 actually starts its life cycle in white American ex-bourbon oak. So coming off the still, the liquid will be cut down to around 60% ABV. It'll go into the ex-bourbon cask first. Those ex-bourbon casks come from Jim Beam or Heaven Hill distilleries over in Kentucky. So, of course, barrels of high quality. And we'll sit in there for the first period of aging. The thing that you'd notice about Brugal is we don't have age statements on our bottles because we like to let the liquid speak for itself, and because the temperature of aging and the accelerated rate of aging that happens in the Dominican Republic isn't something that the entire world is familiar with yet. So we prefer to let the liquid do the talking. But you can expect that we're going to sit in that ex-bourbon for approximately 6 to 8 years before moving that liquid into an ex-Oloroso sherry cask from Jerez for another 4 to 6. So what you've probably noticed, what I always notice with Brugal, is that it really ends on that beautiful, slightly dry but very fruity sherry finish.
Mm. It's actually it's definitely what I well it interests me the most. I mean, one of the reasons I don't drink more rum personally is because I find I'm not a super sweet tooth guy. Whereas the dryness of this is
Mhm.
what it really attracts me to it. Definitely, it's gorgeous.
Well, that's the thing that I love about working with Brugal actually, because I think that a lot of people have that same impression that you do, Luke, you know. So many rums, so many great rums are on the sweeter side, and that just isn't necessarily what everybody's looking for. And we don't always know that there's other options because you might try two or three, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. The category is so vast that it might be really difficult to actually get to the rum that's for you and that's for your palate. But I'm so often in front of people that are predominantly whiskey drinkers, and I think that Brugal is such a great rum to sort of get onto that journey with because you do have those familiar touch points, both with those ex-bourbon notes and those sherry notes, and just that drier palate that makes it a lot easier to keep going in for another sip. But it's still really good to drizzle on top of ice cream as well. So we've got the best of both worlds, right?
No, de definitely, definitely. I think if anything, that makes it more interesting to drizzle on ice cream because you can get all that sweetness from the vanilla, in the ice cream. So yeah, it's brilliant. Excellent.
Absolutely.
This is for anyone who's wondering. This is it's £51 currently on our website. But with your 15%, you get at the end of this tasting, you get a 43, 35, and that'll net you 172 W Club points. So one to pick up maybe. Sorry, you were going to say?
No, no, don't worry. Just yeah, I think that in order to, we're about to try some really exceptional products, but it's always great to sort of start at the beginning and start with the bare bones of sort of who we are as a brand, who Brugal is. 1888 is named after the year we started to produce rum, so it's a product really, really close to our hearts. It harkens back to our founder being the first to age rum. It harkens back to the netting in the second generation, the double aging in the third, and so on. And this was the first product that our fifth generation actually put out there. And she sort of really set a precedent with this that has only accelerated as we've moved forward. So I invite you guys now to pour out, if you haven't already, or at least pick up your Coleccion Visionaria edition #1 and just start having a little nose with it. Start noticing the color, the legs, interact with it a little bit. Before I actually introduce it to us properly, I just also wanted to gently touch on part of our sort of fourth generation story. See, our fourth generation in 1988 and our 100-year anniversary introduced something called the Brugal Foundation. And to put it into context, 1988 was not the first time that Brugal started to operate some quiet philanthropy as a brand. This is something that had been happening for a long time, but the fourth generation gave it a name. And the way that this works is it effectively provides an arm of the business that funnels into supporting the Dominican Republic and its people with things such as health, infrastructure, and access to education. And it's a really beautiful and really important part of our story that we don't talk about too often, but I always think it's nice to sort of remember it. And this is a perfect way to see it in action, if you like, just in the way that the 1888 bottle comes to life. So much to much to the dismay of certain parts of the company, a lot of everything that goes into the making of an 1888 bottle is still done by hand. So our lids are dipped in wax by hand, the nets put on by hand, and the adornments all put on by hand. That actually occupies around 100 jobs at the distillery. And so naturally, it would be a lot more affordable to automate all of those practices, but it's something that the Brugal family are very much uncompromising on because they want to make sure that they're nurturing those opportunities for the people that are indigenous to the island that they, effectively came to way, way from Catalonia in Spain with the desire of producing a world-class rum. And so they always try and make sure that they're giving back and producing opportunities for the Dominican Republic as a whole to grow just as they are. So just a nice little tidbit of information on the wider happenings at the Brugal distillery and within the Brugal family, folks. But I will move us into an incredible product, I hope you'll all agree, which is Coleccion Visionaria edition number 1.
Yeah, well,
Now,
the nose is definitely stunning anyway. I haven't had a sip yet, but it's gorgeous, yeah.
it is unbelievable. It's interesting. So at the distillery, we don't, every single product starts life in the same way. The fermentation and the distillation are always exactly the same. So every difference that you taste, every nuance that you feel with our products all comes from those sort of expert cask processes and decisions made at the distillery level. With where we're at the moment, guys, we'll talk a little bit about edition number 1 first, but try to make sure that you save a little bit to do a side-by-side with edition number 2, because I'm about to talk you through a really incredible technique of aromatic cask toasting, which is how we produce both editions, and the only difference is the raw ingredient that we use, and seeing the sort of transformative nature of that side by side is really quite incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, already Dom has said that the Visionaria 01 is similar to the 1888 on the nose, but there's more citrus and dark chocolate coming through. Totally agree. I mean, there is this like the kind of dark chocolate flakes, like as it says on the screen, the cocoa powder really really hits the back of your palate. It's extraordinary.
I'm so glad to hear you guys picking up on the chocolatey cacao notes already. Yes, that is the ingredient of choice for the aromatic cask toasting process that goes into Coleccion Visionaria 1, actually. So incredible. The meaning behind Coleccion Visionaria, it means visionary collection. And this was a collection that allowed our maestros roneros to sort of flex their creative muscles and start to think innovatively and produce something that was, a little bit of a step to the left from what had been made to date, both within Brugal and kind of the wider rum category. So what you've actually got here is a world's first technique, which we have sort of christened aromatic cask toasting. And the reason we actually unearthed this technique was because we wanted to figure out a way to bring out the very best in Dominican ingredients. So the Visionary collection is all about highlighting flavors and aromas that are indigenous to the Dominican Republic. And starting with cacao made sense because the Brugal family home in the Dominican Republic is actually lined with cacao trees. And so it's a flavor and an aroma specifically that is so, so familiar to our master rum makers. And it's something they've grown up with and it's very, family oriented to them. So it was a no-brainer that this was the first step to utilize this technique. It's also worth mentioning that the Dominican Republic is actually the #1 exporter of organic cacao globally, not cacao as a whole, of course, we're just a tiny little place, but of organic cacao. It is the #1 producer. So the quality of the cacao that comes from the DR is really quite exquisite. So that's kind of the how and why of this being edition #1. But in terms of the actual process, this makes it a little bit easier to bring it to life. So just like with 1888, and just like you'll find with Coleccion Visionaria 2 and with Maestro Reserva, we're always double aging, no matter what. So the Coleccion Visionaria range, before it goes into the European new oak cask that I'm talking about here, it's already double aged in ex-American and then ex-European oak casks respectively. And it goes into this third cask as more of a finishing. So it'll sit in here for up to a year, let's say. But before the liquid goes in, the cask is treated with this process whereby the raw ingredient, let's imagine it's sort of like a basket, like almost like a chip basket, if you like, or like a fryer basket. And that's sort of suspended on top of the cask, just like this. Just underneath that, we've got some old exhausted staves that are no longer of use, which we use to start a fire. And so that raw ingredient is toasted and roasted within the cask, but without touching the cask. And what happens then is, of course, all of those natural aromats from that toasting process are imbued into that new oak. And as soon as that process is complete, we remove that contraption with the cacao beans, and the liquid goes in there that's already been double aged, and it will sit in that cask for approximately a year and take on all of those aromatic qualities, also a little bit of texture as well, because those cacao beans will gently burst and the essential oils will actually be expressed onto the staves too. So all of that goodness is then imbued into the rum, and approximately a year later, it's blended and bottled and ready for people like us to sit down and enjoy.
Marvelous. Well, absolutely beautifully described. Greg said definitely tasting the chocolate in the CV1. The no, it's absolutely gorgeous. I love the kind of the bottle is I don't know if it's is it the glass is slightly more frosted or something. It's it looks very different as well in itself.
Yeah, so I'll go back to this to make it a little easier. So what we've got is, like you said, Luke, we've got a little bit of a frosting on the bottle, which actually is there to sort of signify those sort of aromatic smoke properties that sort of give Coleccion Visionaria its character. So in edition number one, you've got it this way, and of course that little brown label saying edition one that indicates the cacao. You'll notice on the bottle it doesn't say anything too exuberantly about the fact that it is cacao, because this is not a flavored rum by any means. This process, the liquid never touches the cacao never touches the wood either. So
Mm.
it's just an aromatized rum, not a flavored rum. So the flavor of the actual rum itself is still doing the talking, but it's guided by that process that's allowed us to get those unique properties into it. So the cacao is really present, but at the same time, it still takes a back seat and you're able to enjoy those predominantly Brugal characteristics of those raisins, that vanilla, a little bit of fig, if you like.
Yeah, no, big time. We got this is £83 normally, but with your 50% off, folks, it's 70.55. So not bad at all. I think it'd rival, and I'm not just saying this, Georgia, it would rival some of whiskeys in that price point. Like it's got a lovely complexity. The finish just keeps going on and on and on. It's brilliant.
Mhm.
Dom says the additional strength of 45% ABV works well. I totally agree, Dom. I think the part of that
Mhm.
finish as well, not just the process you described, but the extra bit of alcohol in there as well helps in terms of works well to give more intense, bolder taste. There's a velvety dark chocolate with orange peel, touch of nuttiness on the palate, giving way to drying tannins, and rich dark chocolate becoming less sweet. As the finish develops, and in terms of the chocolate notes, this is, just to piggyback on your brilliant comment there, Dom. It's not just those chocolate flavors; it's that the sharpness of the bitterness comes through in a really unique way. It's not just sort of a chocolate adjacent flavor. It's like biting into a lovely piece of dark chocolate. Like it's great. Yeah.
No, exactly. It is, and it's that raw sort of natural cacao flavor more than like your, dairy milk, for example, that you're experiencing with it, right? Which is the thing that I think makes it feel that bit decadent. And you're absolutely right about the 45% ABV as well. It really does just help you to access those sort of nuances of flavor. That being said, I always recommend that you try adding a couple of drops of water, which I'm about to do just now, because those sort of dark cacao notes that we just were speaking about, they actually sort of transform a little bit into something that's more akin to Again, maybe not the most professional tasting note by any means, but you know the little chocolate eclair sweets that are sort of like toffee on the outside and dark chocolate on the inside. That is, or I might be getting it the wrong way around, but that is exactly the flavor that I think you unlock with a couple of drops of water because it really allows that chocolate notes to sort of merge with those natural sort of vanilla-y flavors that you've already got coming through from the rum itself anyway and from that bourbon cask originally.
Mm. No, it definitely transforms. It softens the kind of sharpness of the chocolate. As you say, it allows some of those other flavors to come through. Yeah, maybe I've added too much water. I'm not sure, but it totally transforms it. Definitely. I maybe. I mean, I'm gonna have another sip and see, but I maybe prefer it non-dropped. But it's definitely good to see how it evolves because it's like a different rum.
It really is, exactly. And I think, of course, to the group I'm speaking to today, I'm sure none of you are unfamiliar with adding drops of water to unlock new nuances of flavor. But, in rum circles, or really just outside of the whiskey world, or maybe the whiskey and vodka world, respectively, adding drops of water isn't necessarily something that I think people are super um, used to, yeah, or super comfortable with, or even that they think about doing. And 45% ABV by no means is too strong to enjoy as it is for the majority of people. But just like you said, those couple of drops of water, it's a completely different product. And whether it's your preference or not, it's just nice to see how those flavor notes can evolve with just the smallest of changes.
Definitely. I mean,
And
I must say, I totally agree with you, and I love adding a bit of drop of water to my whiskeys and kind of peeling back the layers. But if you ask me to put water in my vodka, that crosses the line. I will never shall a drop of water grace my vodka.
Well, do you know what? I've got a dear family member who I won't name on this recorded session, whose drink of choice is actually vodka with water, pretty much like a highball, but rather than a soda, it's just vodka with water in about equal parts, and that's exactly what their preference is. So maybe I'm speaking from a very personal example when I say that the vodka world as well.
It's like
Um,
there's something quite I wouldn't that wouldn't be my drink of choice, but in terms of I don't know something like 1930s minimalist aesthetic, it's like a strip like a deconstructed cocktail, like the ingredients you might if you want to add Diet Coke or soda water, that's bourgeois, that's get those flavors out, I just give me water and vodka.
exactly. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like a 50-50 martini, isn't it? Except rather than 50-50 with vermouth, it's 50-50 with water.
Yeah.
But I'm digressing. That's another story for the vodka edition
We
of
should
this incredible
yeah.
club.
No, definitely, because I was just thinking, because I mean, I'm very tempted, as I'm sure people on this call are as well, to knock back the rest of this Visionaria. So maybe, based on your advice of keeping some to compare, maybe we should come on to the next one now before we get too carried away and
Exactly,
finish it.
100%. So I'll move on to another lovely little infographic showing the sort of basic notes that we've got for Visionaria 2, but it's really, going back to what we were saying a little while ago, that tiny change can make such a huge impact. And that's really what we're going to see here because this is exactly the same product in every single way, apart from the fact that with edition number two, we are using Dominican coffee instead of Dominican cacao. And immediately on the nose, you can tell, I believe you can tell that it's a little bit greener in profile, if that makes sense. We're really dark and robust and rich with the cacao, but when we have a nose at edition number two, I feel it's a little bit more delicate, a little bit more subdued, and a little bit more earthy. And
Mhm.
I'd attribute that to the fact that we use fermented but unroasted coffee beans to produce this product. So they're like green coffee beans, if you like. You get a lot of oils from those as well. And don't get me wrong, they become, half roasted by the time that our process is complete. But the essential oils that actually come through because of using those green coffee beans and that touch of freshness, I think really produces a completely different experience than what you get with Visionaria one.
Wow, it really is. It's so much more deeper. You really get those coffee notes coming through. It's really interesting. We've already got some comments coming in there. Dom says Visionaria O2 is fresher on the nose with notes of cut grass, very different from the 1888 and Visionaria 1. It is definitely cut grass, yeah. I get like there's like a
I
bubble
get
gum or something in there. I don't know, that's a bit weird, but there's something in
not at all.
I can't quite pick out, but that's kind of bringing bubblegum to me. But
Hmm.
it's really interesting. The butterscotch definitely there, that those kind of dried fruits. Yeah, no, it's to me it's less spicy than the number one.
Hmm.
Maybe a different type of spice, more kind of front to palate. There's Tony C is the 1888 in a dark and stormy though, which I like to totally like second that comment. I imagine that'd
Definitely.
be gorgeous. But that was actually reminded me in terms of the green coffee in this. So if you put brandy in a coffee and it's a French coffee and Irish whiskey, it's an Irish coffee. Is rum coffee a thing in a cocktail? Or like a,
Well,
with floated cream and, in that way.
it's definitely not a national drink that exists over in the Dominican Republic, but Cafe Dominicana could absolutely be a thing. And actually, for anyone that might be based in London, there is a fantastic cocktail bar at the moment that happens to have exactly that on their menu just now with Collection Visionaria too.
And what cocktail bar is that?
It is Three Sheets in Soho.
Oh, very good.
Yes, yeah. So it's got, if I'm not wrong, a dulce de leche flavored cream on the top as well. So super delicious, super like, you know, South American, Latin American sort of notes to it, but still to those bare bones, that Irish coffee sort of characteristic. So it definitely can exist. It's just not necessarily gained that popularity just yet. But what is really popular, actually, and is kind of the reason why we've done edition number two with coffee, is something that the Dominicans will call a cafecito, or more specifically, a cafecito moment. It's, I suppose, the most familiar thing would be, a lot of Mediterranean countries, sort of espresso culture with taking time out a few times a day to, sit down and have an espresso with friends. Only the cafecito moment is a little bit more on Caribbean timing. So that can look like a little bit more towards half an hour to 40 minutes sitting down with friends, family, colleagues, whatever, to sit and enjoy your cafecito. Um, Dominican coffee is also incredibly strong. So the fact that they are able to sit and enjoy 7 to 8 of those per day, I think is absolutely incredible. But they drink so much of it that only 20% of Dominican coffee is ever exported because it is so close to the hearts and so ingrained in the culture of the Dominicans that they don't want to let it go. So it was sort of the natural next step in the Coleccion Visionaria series.
Brilliant. No, that's fascinating. And Tony C says light eucalyptus on the nose and a wee hint on the palate for me feels a little more layered and complex. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, Tony, there. I think it has.
Mhm.
I'm going to try it with a bit of water so I can also compare it to the first one,
Yes,
which
please
also has a
do.
bit of water in it. So in terms of yeah, that's it, what are your in addition to what we've just been discussing, your kind of favorite Brugal mixers to go with if one was to go down that route? Not that any of these
Ooh.
drams need them.
Well, do you know what? The beauty of the full Brugal collection is that there's nothing within the portfolio that needs to be mixed in order to be enjoyed. I think, rum as a category in the past, um, much I suppose like, tequila with tequila slammers, it was a way of masking something that was maybe not super palatable. And that's I think of a lot of the sort of early years of rum cocktails, that was sort of the main aim as well. How can we use this to get inebriated and not have to endure the flavors that we don't like? Luckily, we've moved away from that now, and so everything in our portfolio is absolutely cracking neat. I hope that we can all agree on that today at least.
Definitely, yeah.
But
So far anyway, yeah.
but when it comes to cocktails, to be honest, everything we've tried up until now, there is opportunities to make great drinks with it. An 1888 old fashioned, our hero serve as a brand with 1888 is an old fashioned with coffee bitters and coconut syrup. So your traditional old fashioned, more or less, but we've got slightly more Dominican flavors in there that complement the rum a little bit more. And that is a cracker of a
Oh,
drink.
interesting.
I've
Coconut
not
syrup.
seen.
That's a good, yeah. It's right. It sounds like
Mhm.
an interesting kind of evolution. I've heard of all sorts of syrups in old fashions, but coconut in a rum old fashion, that's genius. Um,
Mhm.
Dom has said in the chat there, on the palette there are toasted almonds, lemon zest, and sweet spices. The finish is long and sweet spices, giving way to dark chocolate with a touch of cacao bitterness. Another super spirit. All the rums so far have been superb.
Ah, that's great. That's such a great comment. Thank you so much. That was also very poetic tasting notes, I have to say. Really, really
Well,
beautiful.
Dom's got the best tasting notes in the game. I was joking on one of our recent tastings that I think he might have been putting them through ChatGPT or scraping them from the internet, but they were just so brilliant. So fair play to you, Dom.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I need to up my game after hearing that. That was beautiful, but I agree with all of it. It's great being part of this today and having everyone be so forthcoming with tasting notes because I think a lot of the time people are quite shy about them because they are so personal. But what we always see, what we've seen today, right, is as soon as somebody says something, all of a sudden you start to see that as well. And that sort of unification of tasting notes, they seem that they polarize us, but actually they bring us together. And it's always such a joy to see. So thank you to everyone for being so forthcoming with what you're experiencing. Is there anything that is coming up there? I can't see the
Well,
chat just now with
it's
my screen sharing in
Dom's
terms of
tasting
the
notes.
side by side.
Yeah, well, let us know what you're thinking of the side by side. I just, in terms of what you said about the suggestive nature of tasting notes, I think that is, yeah, it's a really powerful idea. And yeah, I often, in my private moments when you're doing these tastings, wonder, how much of it is sort of like you're actually, oh yeah, I get that now, or are you being suggested, but it's interesting that kind of psychology, because I think this one. This smells like sort of revolution and overthrowing the 1%. What do you say, folks? I mean, how suggestive is the tasting note? But no, obviously being facetious. But yeah, no, it's love. It's something we actually tease out a lot in these tastings. Well, not a lot, but it comes up frequently, mainly because of how eccentric I am in terms of where these tasting notes come from. Why the spirits are amazing at transporting you to a time in the past, as you mentioned yourself, it's very personal, and also, yeah, how you kind of see something written down or someone mentions it in the chat and suddenly you get it. It's like it's phenomenal. It's what makes sharing these experiences so wonderful. Tony C has said the CV2 at 45% would pair wonderfully with a Dom Rep cigar too. Do you have
Oh.
recommended cigar pairings?
Do you know, I can't say that I do. I don't let the Dominican team hear me say this, but I'm not much of a cigar gal myself. But the cultural relationship over there with cigars is actually really, it's quite phenomenal to be honest. The inclusivity of it over there is great. It's really like a shared moment for the entire family. Like it's for everyone and it's with everyone. So the next time I have the pleasure of heading on over there, I will see if Miguelucho, who's one of our other maestros, will introduce me to his favorite. But I've not got anything that I can recommend just yet. But I would say anyone that's only had Cuban cigars, get out there and try a Dominican one for sure.
Marvelous. Before we come on to the next one and give people time to compare, I've got a couple of questions. I was doing in some research for this. I saw somewhere online, and this is might be just my picking up the this what was written wrong, rather than the thing actually ties in with what Greg just said in the chat there, which is have you been to Brugal HQ? Because is there one distillery? Is it a multiple locations? That was something I couldn't quite understand from some of the stuff that's written on the brand website, let's say.
Yeah, that's actually a really valid point there. So we our sort of the beating heart of Brugal is Puerto Plata, which is on the northern side of the island. That's like sort of been the hub for the family and the brand since the beginning. Over years, so when I was speaking about generation three and about having sold the sugarcane fields to focus on the rum mastery side of things, for example, when that happened, the distillery actually moved to the south, which is in a place called San Pedro de Marcoris, which is right next to the sugarcane production facilities that we work with to produce our rum. Because it just made so much sense. The molasses is so heavy. I spoke earlier about the millions of gallons that we've got on site. And so shipping that across the island just didn't make sense for us. So what we've got now is over in the south, we've got our distillery, which is where we produce our new make spirit. That new make spirit is then transported to the north of the island in Puerto Plata, which is where our warehouse facility is. So that's where everything's aged and everything's matured. And that's sort of, if anyone was going to go over to visit the Brugal, well, not the distillery, but I suppose go to visit the Brugal family home, the Puerto Plata warehouse facility is probably the place that would be best for that.
Marvelous. And you've been over there yourself?
I have. I couldn't believe my good fortune actually. I joined the brand, like I said, early this year, and it was about 3 months later that there happened to be a sort of global gathering of all of our brand ambassadors, and I was able to get myself over to the Dominican Republic. Um, Safe to say, absolutely incredible place, best people, best food, but stiflingly hot. Great temperature for our rum, not so great for my British tolerance, but
What, what,
really quite an incredible trip.
what time of year did you say it was?
It was May, late May, which is not even as hot as it gets for them.
Yeah. No, I can imagine.
They
I
were
was
telling
in,
me it was nothing.
well, let's say I was in Barbados in April, and when we were leaving, they were saying it was kind of the end of a lot of their tourist season because obviously it stays on, but the height of it is that kind of sort of March, April, maybe start to May because it gets people don't want to travel there in after that because it gets too hot. Like so yeah, I can imagine how hot it must have been in that time of year. But hey, I'd much rather as uncomfortable as it can get. I'd take it over the cold any day personally. But
Yeah, well, and also, do you know what? It's gently manageable, more so for the natives than for me, but they also stick to the shade as much as possible, as opposed to those of us who are looking to get a tan. But it's just such a great climate for our rum production as well,
mm,
because as a lot of you on the call might be familiar with, the angels share the liquid loss to evaporation year on year in a climate like the Dominican Republic is so much more accelerated than what you'd get in Scotland, for example. Quite different climates, and so that 1 to 3% lost in Scotland on average will transform into something like 8 to 10% in the Dominican Republic and other countries in a similar sort of region, which is a crazy amount of loss, but it also has so many benefits because we get so much more wood interaction. And so that sort of, it really accelerates the relationship between the liquid and the wood and it accelerates the sort of complexity that you get on the palate.
mm.
Like I was saying earlier, we don't have age statements on our products. And it's because of that exact reason, letting the liquid do the talking and not be dictated by a number that doesn't necessarily represent the, richness and complexity and elegance of what you've got in your glass. Um, Actually, speaking of that elegance, I
That
feel
is
like it's the perfect time.
that is
to-
wonderful segue, I must say.
Thank you.
S
Thank you
S
very
tier.
much.
Uh,
So we've got this incredibly beautiful little slide just letting us know that we're being introduced to Maestro Reserva. So we know that we're in for something pretty special. So please do grab your glass. I've even got my extra special little tasting glass for this one. And we'll dive into Maestro Reserva. So I'll tell you a little bit about the product because like the Collection Visionaria range, we've also got quite an incredible story behind the sort of methodology, if you like, and the cask expertise that have gone on into creating this unique product. But I would be amiss if I kept you from the aroma that you've got on this dram because it's one of my absolute favorite things to interact with ever. It's the first time that I tried this, I was actually having a full sweet tasting as well, and this wasn't the final one, but I couldn't move on because I couldn't stop going in for more. You'll notice immediately, not only does it smell completely different, but the color is entirely different as well. It's a lot lighter, which isn't usually what happens when we get to the most prestige of the drams of the day, right? We're usually getting darker, we're usually getting more aged. That's not the case with Brugal. You've got this delicate sort of like yellowy amber color. It's basically like the color of a honey syrup, right? And the nose is incredibly similar. It's so much sort of like wild honey, subtle caramel, also a little bit of fermented like pineapple, passion fruit, like those like nice top notes of like really tropical Caribbean fruit that don't quite make it through the sort of rich oakiness of the previous products that we've tried.
No, definitely, it's absolutely gorgeous. I think as you say, that kind of tropical fruit flavor really comes through, especially on the palate. This to me, and this is I'm totally ignorant to rums, so forgive me again. Just to caveat what I'm about to say with that. The This reminds me of more what I would have, if someone said you're going to try a nice premium rum, this is what I kind of would have imagined versus what we've tried so far, if that makes sense.
Hmm. No, absolutely. And I'm actually, it's quite refreshing to hear you say that because a lot of the time, people's opinion of a premium rum is stipulated by their opinion of a premium whiskey, for example, which typically leads with age. So it's quite refreshing actually to hear you say that, like, because exactly that, this is our most premium product, and I think it's really, it's really, really clear on the palate that you're getting something quite exciting, is the word that I would use. So please go ahead and interact with it, guys. Like, let your palate give way to that sort of like creaminess, that vanilla, that just real like explosion of flavor, and that length will go on and on as I tell you about the process that we call dark aromatic toasting.
Marvelous.
So,
Well, just before you, sorry, I'm just going to jump
no,
into a
please
few
do.
comments from the chat there. It's been a foodie night. Greg has said my wife has baked a fruit cake and it goes wonderfully with Brugal, and then Dom says my wife
Oh,
predicted rum and raisin ice cream and fancy rum. So between vanilla ice cream earlier on and now that it's all coming. Tony C says really sorry but have to leave. I've thoroughly enjoyed what's been a new brand to me, all cracking drams and now firmly on my drinks radar. Georgia, you're a star. Thanks, and all the best. All best wishes and best wishes
you
all.
Tony.
Sorry,
Yeah, thanks for joining.
marvelous. So, sorry. Yes, well, as what you were saying
No,
about the.
don't apologize. It's always I can't see the comments with my screen sharing, so it's really great to sort of hear everyone interacting again and sort of know how everyone's getting on with it all, as opposed to me just rambling on. So no, it's good, thank you. But I just wanted to let you know sort of the overview of what the dark aromatic toasting process is there, guys. So we talked about the process that went into Collection Visionaria. We've got another category first technique here with Maestro Reserva as well. But this one is quite different, and it's at the top line is something that I always like to describe as effectively midway through the aging process, us removing the rum and bruleeing the inside of the cask. Now, that as a line doesn't really say too much unless I give it a little bit of context. So the rum is double aged like everything else in the Brugal portfolio. This is in ex bourbon and then ex American oak sherry cask. So we've got the consistency of American oak throughout the production of Maestro Reserva. But halfway through the sherry cask aging, what we actually do is we remove the rum from the sherry casks and we set it aside in stainless steel tanks just to sit and marry. And while it sits there, our maestros will go into those sherry casks that have just been emptied and they will use a high heat torch going up to excuse me, going up to around 300 degrees Celsius to slowly and gently toast and caramelize the inside of those casks. So during that process, that flame will basically marry with the residual rum that exists in the casks, as well as the natural sugars that exist in the wood of the casks. And it will create almost like a gentle crust of caramel that will sit in the contours of that wood. And they'll take the flame out at just the perfect time so that it's caramelized and toasted, but not burnt, not bitter, not astringent. Very much like the art of perfectly toasting a creme brulee. And then the rum will go straight back in and finish off its aging cycle and soak up all of that natural sort of sweetness and that natural sort of abundance of flavor that happens when you antagonize wood to such a degree. And that's kind of how you get to this incredible product. All of those nuances of flavor, all of that sort of like brightness, but then it's also what you might be noticing accented with a little bit of a smokiness that comes from that like gentle charring.
No, it's really gorgeous. There's something on the nose that I can't quite articulate. Dom said on the nose there's a rich caramel with delicate vanilla and a touch of white pepper and orange. Claire said that is so smooth and creamy, much too easy to drink. It's Claire and Ian there. So yeah, I'm gonna have to nose it away a bit more and see there's something there that it's just on the tip of my tongue and I can't quite place it. But no, it's another excellent rum. This one, folks, just for in terms of cost, it is a bit more punchy, no pun intended, love an old rum punch. Was the it's £150, but I mean definitely worth it. It's a good one for Christmas, I'd say, to have in if you've got a because this I feel like this is a spirit that will also if you invite someone over, even if you're not into drinking spirits, it tastes premium. You straight away know that you're not drinking your run-of-the-mill spirit, and it probably would be someone who's maybe not a maybe if you've got friends who are brandy drinkers, rum drinkers, whiskey drinkers, it also kind of covers a lot. So might be one you get £22.50 off that with the 50% off code I'm about to give now because we're nearing the end. And that will also net you 508 W Club Rewards points. So that's £10 off your next purchase. So like, listen, there's very little reason not to pick up a bottle, wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree. It's exactly like you said though, like, it's a real occasion product here. It's not necessarily something that we're reaching for every day. It's an opportunity to, reward yourself or reward your friends, family, give them something that you know is going to be a really unique experience for them. And that's what keeps me going back for Maestro Reserva time and time again. It's that uniqueness and that incredible aroma. Like you
The
said, there's always something that you just can't put your finger on. It's almost a little bit like a marshmallows as well on the nose. It's just
marshmallows is a
every time I
fantastic.
go in, there's something else there.
There's like a an eau de vie brand from the Alsace region. I can't remember the name of it, and it's probably for the best. I don't mean naming other brands on your Brugal tasting, but it's they do like wild fruit fermented eau de vie in these massive steel vats. It's really interesting stuff and stuff like lavender
Sick.
flavored stuff. But it's all natural fermentation flavors, and it's one of those I think that I tried a long time ago. That on the nose you kind of pick up some of the flavors that are in some of those kind of fruity eau de vies.
I
Um,
love how specific the memories are that we get on the
Yeah,
nose, right?
definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's sound and smell. I think way more than anything else. I walk into a room and smell something or hear an old song. You're there. I'm sure you're the same. But
Absolutely.
Dom said the mouth feels. The mouth feel ranges from velvety to slightly woody dryness. The flavors here are stable, toasted nuts, hints of smoke. Werther's original caramels. It's a rum that intrigues and teases. It's not in your face, but engages the senses and offers huge interest. Another brilliant tasting note, Dom. I must say.
Every time. Incredible.
Um, so normally at this time of the night, we ask everyone what their favorite was in order. So please do get that in the chat, folks. WS24 capital B capital or or R, as you say over here, is the code for 15% off. So yeah, Brugal Rum is the way to remember it. Whiskey Shop 24 Brugal Rum will give you 15% off all of the drams we've tried here tonight, or the rums, I suppose. Can you call rums drams?
Well, I believe that we ought to be able to, make it autonomous language, but typically in the rum space, they like to use tot.
Tot.
Yes, a little tot of rum. But I am a firm believer that you can use the language that you want, you can drink it as you want. Honestly, Maestro Reserva is such a delicious dram, but if you wanted to shake this up into a daiquiri, the daiquiri to end all daiquiris, by all means, go out there and live your dreams.
No, totally. This has led me on to two questions. Do you ever remember? And to be honest, you're definitely too young for this, I'd say, and I barely remember it because I think it's more from it being repeated in the zeitgeist. But you know the tiny tots or tots TV, you know.
Tots TV, I do remember that
I'm a
actually.
tot, just me on tots, teeny, tom, and tiny. That's when you say, you know, now that I've heard that rum is called a tot, I've never, you know, that'll never be the same again. The every time I hear that song, not that I hear it often, I definitely don't play it in my car.
Your
Um,
ringtone currently, right?
yeah, that's my ringtone. Yeah. The other question was your tasting glass. Do you want to describe that to us? This is extraordinary.
It is so ridiculous, but I love it so much. To be honest with you, I've got nothing to say apart from that it was a very lucky find when we were moving offices. A few months ago, there was about four of them, and I managed to take two. Otherwise, I'd been using them for the full suite today. But I thought I'd save my most extravagant glass for the most extravagant dram today.
Marvelous. So some of the results are coming in for what people prefer. So Greg says four, which is the Maestro, and then one, two, three. So he goes for the 1888 next. Claire Neen says four, three, two, one. So the Maestro winning again there. Dom says Maestro, Visionaria two, then Visionaria one. Neil says Visionaria, or sorry, Visionaria one, then Maestro, then Visionaria two, and then 1888. Martin says really enjoyed them all. New to rum, so looking forward to delving a little more deeper now. 4123 for me in terms of order of preference. Thank you for a very interesting evening. Interesting presentation. Really enjoyed the tasting. So Claire and Ian. So yeah, any thoughts on how people have what people have preferred or not preferred there?
Do you know, I always love to, whenever I deliver an education session on Brugal, I always do the exact same thing, and I love to see how varied the answer is because, you know, it's always so divisive in the most beautiful way. Like Maestro Reserva is incredible, but so is 1888, so is the Collection Visionaria range, and everybody's got a favorite that sort of resonates with them the most. But the beauty of working with a brand like Brugal is, as I hope anyway, there's nothing in the lineup that is not enjoyable to drink. You choose a favorite, but then even the least favorite in that lineup is still something that's enjoyable. So the variation is great to see, and the reception, particularly from those of you that are new to rum, it's really great to see. And if this has opened up an avenue for you to delve even deeper into the category, guys, I couldn't be more pleased. So yeah, thanks for joining us on this rum journey, I suppose.
Marvelous. No, well, thank you for joining us on Digital Drams. It's been a really great evening. And again, it's the first rum we've had on, so that's fantastic. So we'd love for you to come on again. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Thomas says, as whiskey enthusiast, it's good to try other spirits, but Brugal rum certainly doesn't disappoint. Thank you for this wonderful experience. So folks, our next digital drams will go on sale. I'm hoping tomorrow evening, but it might be early on Friday. And it's going to be with Highland Park, so your colleagues as well at Edrington, Georgia. So do keep an eye on your inboxes for that. That will be taking place next Thursday, the 21st. If I've got that right, I'll check that because this is being recorded. So yeah, next Thursday, the 21st. So Jordan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, thank you. It's been really great, honestly. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving Brugal Rum the opportunity to penetrate the wonderful world of digital drams.
Marvelous. And we might catch you at what's the name of that the place with that cocktail in Soho, the Three Sheets, was it?
Yes, three sheets in Soho, the Dominican coffee. Anyone that's local, not one to be missed.
Brilliant. Well, we'll maybe catch you there some evening. And wonderful. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, including yourself. And we'll talk soon, and hopefully for anyone watching this back on the recording, you've also enjoyed it, and we'll see you in next Thursday for Highland Park. So thanks, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers. Uh,
Thank you.
I have to end the call now. I don't know why. I've lost. Zoom always seems to change its setup every time I'm
Just keeping you on your toes, keeping it
exactly every
fresh
time
for
the
everyone.
record button, the end call button just seems to disappear. There we go. We found it. Brilliant. Cheers, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
See you.